Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we'll be talking about this legendary blizzard in terms of its size, in terms of its impacts especially, and in terms of its placement and just overall uniqueness. This thing is going to bring impacts again from coast to coast. The impacts are going to vary from very, very cold weather, from very, very heavy snowfall to extreme winds, and to actually very, very heavy rainfall in some areas. So this thing's going to have it all. One thing that it won't have is severe weather, so that's good. At least, that's eliminated from this system. But yes, this thing is, it's also really so many moving pieces with this thing. The cold, the development of the series of low pressures. It's a lot of uncertainty still that is kind of circulating this system. But it seems very likely that there will be a widespread, very impactful winter storm, or I should say blizzard, for at least a good portion of the country. Okay, let's start talking about this right away. Again, skip to your region to see how your region will get impacted by this storm, right? Because this video will realistically be, I don't know how long yet, but probably over 25 minutes, 25, 20. So if you want to just see your region, it's 6 to 7 minutes. Click on it and I'll discuss how this storm will impact you and what to expect after the storm, especially if you live across the western areas where this system is currently ongoing. Okay, I want to start off across the Northwest, as I alluded to, and I want to first off show you that this system is already ongoing. Notice that it may landfall. Obviously, it already produced some snow across extreme Northwestern Washington. Well, it produced snow other places as well, but this is where a lot of the heavy snow fell. You can see up to 12 inches across right there, South Lake, Whatcom. And Seattle, actually, I saw a little report here coming in at 2.3, so not bad for downtown Seattle. Definitely something that is probably a nice little pleasant surprise, maybe for some that like the snow. You can see higher elevations obviously did get a little bit more, and now it's spilling into the Idaho Panhandle and into Montana. Again, this thing is ongoing currently for you guys. It's not, the legendary status that it will reach, or just the massiveness that it will reach across the Great Lakes, but it's still nonetheless there, and it's impacting you guys. Notice this is what the current radar looks like. Again, as I said yesterday in my video, by this time tomorrow, so at that time it was 6 p.m. Again, this is now 7 p.m. a bit later. You can see it's mainly done for Washington, Oregon, a little bit of snow still into Montana, and it will continue snowing across the lower part of Idaho and into Wyoming and Colorado and Utah before making its exit onto the plains into tomorrow and on Thursday. So let's start showing you that. So again, for the Northwest, there are still some warnings and watches you can see in place across the higher elevations. Obviously, the big news story is almost the cold for everyone across the Northwestern region. We'll get on some very, very cold air, but let me run these models out for you to see the timing. So again, if you're watching this across Washington, Oregon, 9, 10 o'clock, maybe even later, chances are you're watching this and you're done. The system's done for you. Idaho, you're probably still dealing with this, especially if you live from the cities in Idaho that are largest, which is Boise, Great Falls here. Not Great Falls. What's that city? Boise Falls? No, Twin Falls, Idaho Falls. Yeah, so those cities, Pocatello, Boise, these larger cities will probably still be dealing with the snow into tonight. You can see 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Not consistent snow, nothing incredible. Some snow showers as this drags through southern Montana and into northwestern Wyoming. Attacks the Grand Tetons, Yellowstone, into Wyoming, and then Cheyenne. By the time it's 2, 3 tomorrow, you start seeing some of that snowfall. This may not look like much, and it really isn't, but if you get under one of those little bands, which you can see it has some sort of banding features there, you could get a few inches of snow at least. The Wasatch just east of Salt Lake City will also be picking up a little bit of snow, and the Rockies just west of Denver will also be picking up. But Denver itself will also pick up a little bit of snow, nothing too great. And you can see that by the time late tomorrow, so 12 a.m., 1 a.m., really Thursday for most, I sit up pretty late at night. So for me, 3 o'clock in the morning is still, the previous day always. As I go to sleep, sometimes 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Not something to be proud of, but that's why sometimes I say, sometimes for me saying 2 o'clock is usually just kind of natural for me to say that's the day prior. Notice the snowfall amounts aren't incredible, especially for the mountainous area. Still something that will obviously cause some issues, especially with the fact that this will, be stuck everywhere. It won't be melting, and it will be cold right after this, and that's probably the bigger bigger news story, as there are wind chill watches, as you saw in the National Weather Service map, and wind chill warnings, I should say, as this is pretty imminent. And looking at the 2-meter temperature anomaly for this area, you can see that the cold here is really, I mean, historic proportions, meaning that probably some records are going to be broken here. And you can see, I mean, it's off the charts almost here, 28 degrees below normal in terms of Celsius. So in Fahrenheit, that's even greater, as Celsius is a bit of a stronger unit at that level, especially when, because Fahrenheit and Celsius equal out at -40, so that's that. Notice across British Columbia, Alberta, no one's really spared from this. Good news for you guys that by really Christmas Eve, this thing is worst of the cold is out of here, and actually you start warming up. So by Christmas, there could be some pretty warm air in here. May not be something you want to hear, especially if you want that white Christmas. Some of that may be, again, melting, but you're not going to be seeing warm temperatures. Just warm for December standards. If you look at some of the 2-meter temperature shaded, you can see some of these temperatures when that brunt of the worst of the cold air moves in Thursday. After that system pulls away, the snow system, Thursday into Friday, we have really cold temperatures. Thankfully, they move away, and you can see by Christmas Day, 30s, 40s, obviously cooler near the mountains and where the snowpack is. And that is that. And we see a different type of pattern move in for you guys across the Northwest. If you're watching this from the Northwestern United States, again, this system isn't going to be as impactful for you as, say, for other areas, but what you will see, as opposed to other areas won't, is just constant traffic potentially from just systems following this. You can see on Christmas, we see another one on the 26th, the 27th, and that continues. You can see well into the new year, potentially storm after storm. Very active pattern, so that's something I also want to address for this part of the world. Constant activity, rain, snow, depending on which setup. You can see some of them are going to be more snowy, some of them are rainy. I'll go into details, obviously, as those systems approach. Let's now look at the Southwestern United States, as this is another area of the United States that will be interestingly impacted by the storm. What I mean by this is, well, basically, we won't really see this storm bring a lot of snow, right? So again, I'm just going to play this through. This is what we're looking at right now. You can see still moving through Idaho, as I was mentioning, but look, northern Utah, Nevada, picking up a little bit of snow, California, a little bit of rain. This stretches through Colorado, really doesn't even reach New Mexico, and that's a storm for you. So if you're watching from this region, yes, this is really nothing incredible for you, and you may be a bit surprised by the title, but since I forecast for the entire United States, I need to address this storm, in the fashion that will be most applicable to the, the vast majority of people. So because this thing will be affecting millions in the East, I need to call it a massive storm. But for you guys, it isn't. And that's why I like dividing this into regions, so you guys get this, kind of this memo that for you guys, this isn't anything bad. Total snowfall, really nothing incredible. Again, even the areas that do see it, this isn't a massive event for you. And do note that in terms of temperatures, or, the cold blast rate that I was talking about and alluding to, I apologize about that. A little stomping that you heard there. You may or may not pick that up. But do note that the cold air does make its way into Colorado and New Mexico. And as I was saying, not all of this spills through into Nevada, Arizona, California. You guys get spared from this. However, look at states like New Mexico and Colorado. It's literally splits the states in half, right? Like New Mexico, half of it, the western side is 15 degrees above average. Maybe not that much, but 10 degrees above average, while the western side is 15, 20 degrees below average. So it leads to some pretty interesting contrast. And you can see, if I take a look at the thermometer reading, we see areas in the states that are in that state's 50s, and then we see areas that are -2. So quite a contrast, to say the least. But as we move this forward, and I show you this anomaly map, the warm air wins out over time. And again, just a few days after Christmas, we see a warmer pattern setting in. Won't be too predominant. You can see within a few days, more cooler air maybe moves in, but definitely it's gonna feel warm, especially for the areas that are first impacted by that cold air. Let's move now on into the north central United States. As again, I pretty much showed these areas, the Northwest and the Southwest, what they wanted, what basically what's going to happen again. This is the region where we really start seeing this storm become extremely impactful, because the western regions, again, they're going to see the system as a weak side. Here's where we see the strong side. So again, by Wednesday, you could see it. We already see the action in the form of the snow moving into the Dakotas. Again, very cold, so this snow will be blowing around, creating those blizzard conditions, and that's why we have those blizzard warnings issued for a good portion of the central United States. Notice, Minnesota, you may not be at the epicenter of this system, right? I'm just clicking on the Minneapolis area here, but you're still going to be seeing impacts. Now here you can see that they expanded the blizzard warnings just south and west of the city, but whether or not this will incorporate Minneapolis itself, we'll have to see. I would say probably. And yeah, you can see winter storm watch, so it's interesting. They showed a winter storm warning for Wednesday and Wednesday night, 3 to 5, 2 to 4 inches. And then for the second piece, which doesn't even really include heavy snow, it's just, I'm assuming, for the blizzard warnings with those very strong winds. So that's interesting that I just kind of saw that now, because it's hard to see. You can't really see they're overlapping here because the pink kind of outshades the winter storm watches. So yeah, so I guess in that, for these areas, you can see some of these areas are just going to see a little bit of snow initially, and then they're going to see those blizzard conditions, because again, for a blizzard, you don't need snow falling. It could just be blowing around. Going back to this, notice this is the GFS scenario, right? And remember, in the past few days, I was emphasizing this is just what the GFS shows. The European shows something else. Now, thank goodness, the models have come way more in line. So basically, the differences are minimal. They're there between the GFS and European, but I'll just show you the GFS at first and compared to the European. So, you know, you could look at this and assume Des Moines, you're getting in on the snowfall by tomorrow. Minneapolis, same with you. You know, North Dakota, South Dakota, Aberdeen, Minot, Bismarck, you're going to see this pretty much done by tomorrow, late in the night. Nebraska gaining on this, Kansas, Missouri, Kansas City, you're going to see some snow out of this, enough to most likely definitely drop you several inches of snow. Again, this may not look significant, but with that strong winds and no problem accumulating, you will see several inches of snow. Then you can see the system starts intensifying. This is where the models start disagreeing a little bit. Still relatively, relatively in line for how far this thing is, still relatively, which again may not be too far out, but 40, 60 hours, that's still decent. There could be some significant changes. And you notice in moving into Iowa by Thursday, Illinois, Wisconsin, Missouri, and as I put this forward, you can see this starts intensifying. This is where obviously a lot of moving pieces are, how strong this cold air is, how good that moisture flow is from the south, again, you know, the available moisture out ahead of the system, whether or not this low pressure, you know, how quickly it intensifies and how strong it gets, and also the exact placement, the exact track of this. Notice across Wisconsin, Michigan, there will be snow pretty much no matter what way you put it across late Thursday into Friday. It's just, you know, how fast this thing moves out of here. And you can see that this starts showing Indiana, Ohio more in this snowfall. The last 24 hours, there's been a trend where the GFS and European both have shown an eastward trend with this system. So cities like Indianapolis, Central Ohio, Detroit will be picking up a little bit more, while cities like Chicago, maybe Milwaukee, you know, Western Illinois here picking up a little bit more than previously thought. Nonetheless, still a massive system you can see intensifying very quickly as this pushes into Ohio, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Michigan, obviously starting off all of these areas, especially here, starting off as a little bit of rain on Thursday, but into Friday, you start transitioning into heavy snowfall and of those very, very strong winds. And again, it's not necessarily about the total snowfall accumulations. And if you look at the National Weather Service Weather Ready Nation map, and you click on some of these winter storm watches, you see that, let me see, for example, click on my area. For my winter storm watch, they don't mention a single snowfall amount. They just say that, you know, no matter how strong or how heavy the snow will be, there could be an inch because of how, you know, fierce the cold will be and how fierce the winds will be. There's going to be a winter storm watch issued nonetheless, essentially. So that's the thing with this, that, you know, I obviously talk about the snowfall totals because it's interesting, you know, and you guys probably want it as well, so I give my best bets here. But the main thing is, you know, even if this shifts further westward or eastward, and by the way, there's still a good chance that this thing could shift pretty much up until just a few hours before it occurs, because such dynamic systems like this often see adjustments even 18 hours ahead of it occurrence. I remember vividly with this previous system, this, you know, massive previous system we had that dropped that snow across the plains. We saw that little secondary push of snow after that first one occurred across the Dakotas, the one that brought snow into Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin, Minnesota. I remember watching the HER model, and literally every single hour, about 24 hours before it hit Minnesota, I was especially watching Minneapolis, just pretending that I lived there and I was tracking the snow. And I remember watching this, and literally every single model run from the HER, every hour it shifted slightly towards the west, I'm not saying that will happen this time, but I'm saying that we could have something similar. And again, in which way it will shift, east, west, that's anyone's best guess. So, you know, don't really pay attention too much to that, because even if you do get 6 versus 10 inches, you won't really see that much of a difference when the winds will be absolutely annihilating this thing against any surface they can find. You'll see drifts that are tall in some areas. In other areas, there's flat grass, nothing there. So that's going to be this. But notice that this thing really isn't. It's a powerful, intense system. Typically, you don't really see this type of stuff across the Great Lakes. Really, even across any part of the country, this would be a pretty legendary storm. Notice that if I look at the total snowfall, assuming a 10-to-1 ratio, which is flawed, this is what it looks like. It doesn't look too significant for these areas, but the 10-to-1 ratio is most definitely, it's just wrong. There's no way there's going to be a 10-to-1 ratio. It's way too low. So in order to address that issue, I want to take a look at the GFS, the same model I've been showing you, but I want to show you the Kuchera snowfall amounts, which is assuming that correct ratio. And you can see that if I pull up this map, again, just focus on North Central United States, you can see the snowfall amounts are a lot significant. And again, with those extreme winds, that snowfall is, by itself, nothing really too insane. There still will be areas that pick up 2 feet plus, most likely. But it's combined with that incredible wind that makes this thing a legendary storm for this part of the country. So that's that. I will show you the European. The European comes out twice a day, but it does have these intermediate runs every 6 hours that go out only 90 hours, and we just had that come in. And you can see if I take a look at its play out of this system, then you can see it's pretty similar to what I just showed you at the GFS. Again, moving into the plains by tomorrow, and again, you can see pretty heavy snowfall rates even for how dry it is across Iowa, Minnesota, so don't get caught off guard by that. Notice that as I push this into Thursday, we see some pretty significant snowfall across southern Wisconsin, into Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas. You can see Oklahoma City. You guys will pick up a little bit of snow according to this model. Again, the European and GFS pretty in line with that. Arkansas, and then look at that into Illinois, Indiana, and you can see, again, compared to yesterday's video where I was making cities like Detroit, you'll be picking up a little bit more out of this and whatnot, and then this thing starts pivoting around. Again, expect changes to this forecast, but you can see that the placement of this is pretty good, and again, the snowfall that I have pulled up here on a GFS that I showed you earlier is pretty accurate, but again, don't get too caught up with this because it's not necessarily about the snowfall, which will be big. It's just about like that wind and that brutal cold air afterwards. Stay to the end of the video. I'm going to talk about the north central cold wave if you're watching from the north central United States, this part, as I have other regions to address. For now, let's go to the South Central United States. Hello, if you're watching, if you've skipped to this segment, hello, how are you guys? Hopefully you're good. We've had quite a bit of change in terms of the forecast from yesterday, and what we're basically looking at is looking at the GFS. I'll use the GFS because the GFS and European are in line here, relatively speaking. There's just a few minor detail differences, so I'll just use the GFS for the sake of time saving. And notice that Wednesday are mainly good, but by late Wednesday, so if you plan on traveling Wednesday overnight into Thursday, consider not doing that across Kansas, maybe northern Missouri, because you could see Wichita, Topeka. You get in on that snowfall early Thursday, late Wednesday, depending on what type of person you are. For me, this would be late Wednesday, 6 a.m. in the morning. But notice Kansas City, you get in on that snowfall again pretty quick. It moves on within 6 to 12 hours. It's out of there. Into St. Louis, you get some snowfall. Southern Missouri, into northern Arkansas, Little Rock, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, you get a little bit of snow. And if you're watching from this area and you're like, okay, how far south will this snow reach? This is really tricky because sometimes models show something like this and actual radar return is not as significant. Again, if you live across Memphis, Nashville, I would expect at least an inch of snowfall. Further south, Mississippi, it gets a little bit more tricky. Southern Arkansas, don't count on this snow really spreading into Texas. That would be a little bit too much of an ask. But you can see across northern Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Western Kentucky, Tennessee, you're getting that snowfall, southern Indiana, and then that thing's out of there by Friday. But do note that in terms of the total snowfall amounts, this is assuming a 10-to-1 ratio, which again, I've said this before, it's inaccurate because it will be much colder than what we typically see during a 10-to-1 ratio. So let me just let me go on this website where I could actually show you the proper ratio, and apologize for a lack of professionalism here, but let me click on the GFS United States and show you the Kuchera, which is the more accurate snowfall representation of what you guys may see across the south here. And then you can see right there with the latest GFS model run, we see that snow into Oklahoma, Arkansas, reaching maybe an inch, 2 inches, especially across Kentucky, Tennessee. That could be several inches. So that is definitely not out of the question. You can see that little 10th to 1 inch border could stretch into Mississippi, Alabama right there. Again, that is a little bit more of a questionable task. How far south that snowfall reaches for those areas. Again, sometimes the models are pretty bad at predicting some of these things. So that is that in terms of the snowfall. But obviously, the cold air behind this is going to really be an incredible cold blast of air. So if you live across some of these areas, let me show you the 2-meter temperature shaded. We will be going from 30s, 40s into the single digits and even negatives. And again, if you're wondering when this cold air arrives to your city, Kansas City, Wichita, this is by midnight tomorrow going into Thursday. If you live across Oklahoma, this is through the day on Thursday, and it reaches the south. Some areas even across southern Arkansas, southeastern Arkansas may get into the 60s on Thursday, but by the time the nighttime comes, you're into the single digits, 10, 11 degrees. It's going to be cold. Good news is this doesn't necessarily last for too long, the bitter cold air. Still chilly for the time of the year, but you can see some sort of a rebound occur. So that is that for the south central United States. Let's go to the northeast now, where this is a even bigger mess than I would say the north central United States, because not only is there a track difference here, but there's also the rain, snow, playing around, and all sorts of different elements of forecasting surprise that could occur. Not to mention that it's slightly further out because, well, it's further along east away from the storm center where it is right now across the northwest. Notice there's going to be cold air present right now across the northeast as that precip lifts into Pennsylvania. A little bit of snow expected, State College, whatnot, central Pennsylvania. Eventually that converts all easily into rain. However, because of how quick this cold air is moving in behind this, and again, this is where we start getting into some more details that are tricky because of how quick the cold air moves in, what intensity the system is, and what track it exactly takes will all make an impact on this. So again, please stay tuned to your local National Weather Service for updates, because this forecast may change for you quickly and rapidly, even 12 to 13 hours away from the system's occurrence, and we're still, you can see 60 to 50 hours, which in terms of medium range forecasting, it's not far out. In terms of short range forecasting and for minor details, this is definitely something that we need to that is still relatively far out. So notice that as that cold air catches up to that rain, Ohio, Pennsylvania, even West Virginia, you get on that snowfall, at least a few hours of heavy snowfall into New York, upstate New York City, southern New Jersey. You may get some snowfall, but it's going to be pretty quickly ending as soon as it converts to snow. So how much snow you get is a little bit tricky question. You can see across Toronto, so cities in southern Canada, you are going to be transitioning over to snow, but getting more of that kind of wraparound from that blizzard into Ontario, Quebec, Montreal, Ottawa, all those cities as well. Getting in on that, cities and provinces getting in on that very heavy snowfall. Again, it's gonna be wet at first, but that cold air drops really quickly, and that snow turns into a fluffy snow. And by the time all things are said and done, you can see some lake effect is in effect here. The coastal areas get mainly rain; they get quite a bit of it, but the total snowfall is still also pretty significant. Again, this is assuming a 10-to-1 ratio so especially for these northern areas, that is inaccurate. Looking at the proper ratios, you can see these amounts really jump up to potentially over a foot across the areas, especially north of the St. Lawrence River Valley. South a little bit less, upstate New York, Pennsylvania, 3 to 4, 4 to 5 inches, maybe even 8 to 9, and over a foot across the extreme upstate areas here. Michigan getting quite a bit, Ohio, West Virginia potentially picking up quite a bit of snow here. And again, it's not even going to be that much of a difference between 4 and 7 inches, because when you have such strong winds, it's going to get whipped around very aggressively, and that's going to result in, well, essentially, a very hard system to measure the snowfall with, and it's not going to be as noticeable which you would typically see with a more calm system. This is a Euro interpretation. Again, very similar features at this point. They're a lot more in line. You can see eventually, just like the GFS, the latest European model shows that snow catching up, bringing a thud of snow into Virginia, West Virginia, potentially Ohio. How far south into Virginia or North Carolina, it's a bit tricky to say, but you can see that this wraps on, even giving New York City maybe a little brief shot of snow, New Jersey a little bit more into Philadelphia, and then again, further northern areas get stuck in this. And once you are, say, in Erie, Pennsylvania, oh look, it's just a little bit of light snow, yes, but you see those millibars, how tightly packed they are. Extreme snowfall or extreme wind, so that's going to toss that snow around, making this potentially very, very dangerous. Now let's move on towards the southeastern United States, as this is where another area that we could be looking at that is where, well, impacted by this pretty significantly, mainly in the form of rain. Though notice some of the snow does reach down into, say, Tennessee, Kentucky, right, as I was mentioning. mentioning in my other segments, kind of the overlap with some of these regions here. Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, all those cities, at least in Tennessee and Kentucky, we'll be seeing at least a few inches of snowfall. Again, going from a flash freeze, because notice how warm it is out ahead of this. It's going to be raining, and then behind this, the temperatures drop so quickly that you could see ice literally develop all over the roads where the frozen precip is, unfrozen. So that's going to definitely something to be concerned about. Extreme northern Georgia, would not be surprised to see a few flakes throughout the day on Friday. Maybe not accumulations, but I wouldn't be surprised to see an inch or two maybe across northern Alabama, northern Georgia, maybe extreme northern South Carolina, North Carolina towards Appalachian, some more snow into Virginia as well. But again, you can see that quickly gets out of there. So obviously the rainfall will be there, not as significant. There could be some more significant ones towards maybe the Outer Banks. Snowfall, again, limited, but for these areas, any snowfall would be pretty interesting. So we'll have to see how it does here. And again, with that extremely cold air, which I kind of want to zoom out now and give an overview for the whole entire United States. Extreme cold air is going to be another big impact here, and you can see that as it spreads from the northwest, some of those anomalies are just insane. It does moderate a bit as it spreads towards the southeast. Still, record cold air for you guys here. That's going to break some records, and with that snow and ice all over, that's not going to help out quite a bit. So in terms of temperatures, if you're living across these areas, wondering when the coldest year will be for the north central United States, definitely into Friday, but this shifts into the worst days for Saturday and Sunday eastwardly of the Mississippi, across Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, those areas on Saturday into Sunday. And then across the southeast, I would argue, potentially Friday into Sunday, the worst, or Friday into Saturday, the worst days. The northeast, Friday to Saturday, but predominantly Saturday into Sunday, the bulk of that cold air gets in there. Notice then we have kind of another reinforcing shot of cool air, but the pattern does start moderating, again, for December standards, so there won't be 60s in Minnesota, but up along the southeast corridor there to Florida, there could be some warmer temperatures, though still that cold air taking any opportunity you can to sweep back down and drop some snowfall. So that is that, guys. Hopefully, you learned something new, but mainly, hopefully, you guys are a little bit more prepared for this system. Again, I kind of had to rush things. I'm a little bit behind, let's just say, schedule. But again, stay safe. This thing is going to be a monster, and stay tuned to your local forecast, because obviously the cold air, the snowfall, and the changes that this system will still have, it will keep changing, these little fluctuations. And again, don't get too caught up by these snowfall amounts, because it won't be really that easy to see them once these winds blow them up and around, and also it's just mainly the wind and cold air that really is prompting a lot of these winter storm watches very down far to the south, not necessarily the heavy snow. All right, that's basically it, guys, though. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next episode. Take care. See ya.